Welcome to the Cosmic Chosen Channel. You weren't just born, you were prophesied. Long before you arrived in this world, long before betrayal had a name. Even before exile from Eden, your energy was already causing tremors in the unseen realm. They were warned. One will come who won't just know the truth, but embody it. That one was you. And now, the same forces that tried to erase your name are choking on the echo of your survival. Because, truth be told, you weren't supposed to make it. Not because you were weak, but because they knew if you ever stood up, everything would shift. They didn't just want you quiet, they wanted you erased. They slandered your name when they couldn't silence your spirit. But here's the twist. While they rehearsed your ending, heaven was scripting your uprising. According to neuroscience, jealousy triggers pain centers in the brain. And you didn't just hurt their egos, you disrupted their nervous systems. Your glow gave them migraines. Your healing exposed their sickness. And your survival? It was a cosmic violation of their false narratives. Let's be clear. They didn't just want to see you on your knees. They wanted to own your knees. But now, they're the ones bowing to a presence they once dismissed. You're not just the storm they tried to unleash. You're the Eden they were exiled from. Chosen ones, welcome to the video. They wanted you to be unhappy and on your knees. Who is pleading now, though? They wanted you to never know the truth. So let's get started. First of all, they wanted you permanently disarmed, not shattered. Their goal was to disarm you permanently, not merely to get you down hard. Not passing through a phase, not momentarily heartbroken. They wanted you to lose all control of your life. You would therefore remain too numb to proceed even if the agony ceased. Most folks don't grasp that section. The intention was to deprive you of the desire to attempt again, not only to watch you cry. They could take control of you indefinitely if they could make you feel that happiness was no longer a choice. They were wagering on your downfall, not simply being shady. The fact that they didn't always assault you directly just serves to further complicate this situation. No, some of them pretended to be helpful. Behind the scenes, some people fed your doubts while grinning in your face. They wanted you to always be in survival mode, barely able to function, but too exhausted to change. In this manner, you would never be able to identify your true self or your purpose in life. You wouldn't have the courage to dream if you didn't feel safe enough to breathe. In actuality, they were terrified by your lucidity rather than your errors, because their control ended when you realized your own strength. The once you decided to feel, talk, and heal again, you were dangerous. It was never meant for you to return. As soon as they hurt you, your tale was over in their minds. Thus, the whole screenplay they wrote for you was upset when you got up nevertheless. They wanted you to believe that you were irreparable, not that you were shattered. You weren't broken, though. All you had to do was wait for the appropriate time to come back, stronger, sharper, and more resilient spiritually. And now that you're back, they can't handle the fact that you still move gracefully and walk with purpose, and most importantly, you never turned into the person they attempted to mold you into. Second, they were afraid of your self-awareness and attempted to instill self-hatred in you. What they wanted was for you to hate yourself, not life. That was always the plan. They were aware that you would ruin yourself on your own if they could make you don't see your own value when you look in the mirror. You were subjected to psychological warfare like that. They made sure you never noticed the masterpiece inside of you by using comparison, humiliation, subtle jabs, and unrelenting guilt instead of actual shackles. They hoped you wouldn't ever question the dose, so they gave you self-doubt like medicine. It was so silent that it was so dangerous. It wasn't always aggressive or noisy. People who seemed to care, who were just being honest when they undermined your self-esteem, or who only appeared when you were at your lowest point, not to cheer you up, but to remind you that you had fallen, were sometimes its source. And they felt more powerful the more they saw you shrink. They wanted you to think you were weak, but in reality, they weren't powerful. However, they were most afraid that you might wake up. They were afraid that you would begin to question things, go into your origins, start to uncover the lies they had taught you, and come to the realization that you were never broken. You were only buried. Because their impact fades as soon as you start to realize who you truly are. Their strength simply served to confuse you. Their deception began to unravel as soon as you had a clearer vision. Because that's when your energy changes. They were afraid of your self-awareness. At that point, you begin to move with purpose and cease seeking approval. At that point, your presence becomes disruptive rather than passive. You only needed to understand yourself. You didn't have to battle them. And when you did, they lost control. In actuality, Bob, believing in yourself once more was the riskiest thing you could have ever done. Third, they turned your trauma into entertainment by making fun of your suffering. The plot now revolves around your recovery. They found amusement in your suffering rather than merely watching it. To them, your suffering was a spectacle. They were laughing at your breakdowns, chatting about your mistakes, and whispering about your troubles as if they were interesting news rather than a human person collapsing under stress while you were going through actual misery. They viewed you as a show rather than a human being. They were so completely gone. No more empathy. There is no compassion. Because they secretly felt better about how empty they were inside, they enjoyed watching you lose everything. Some of them even attempted to push you farther below. Let's face it. Small, petty, toxic acts, such as rejecting your calls when they know you are in dire need of assistance, spreading rumors when they know your name is already being attacked, and grinning in public while secretly wishing you will never get better, instead of overt ones. Their favorite part was your rock bottom. However, they were unprepared for what transpired next. Not only did you survive, but you also began to heal, in private, slowly, and silently. The same individuals who made fun of your suffering are now seeing your leveling up. They're being eaten alive by it. Your recovery serves as a public reminder of everything they claimed you would never be, not simply a personal victory. Not only did you recover, but you did it in a stronger, smarter, and more complete manner. Since you are no longer bleeding in front of them, they are unsure of how to behave around the new you. You're shining now. You're solid now. You look like peace now. They never imagined you'd discover any. Therefore, they can't tolerate it. They made fun of your trauma, but your recovery changed the course of events. They are now the uneasy audience, made to witness a narrative they believed they were in charge of take an unexpected turn. What's the best part? You're not pretending. You're simply evolving into the person you were always destined to be. Fourth, they stole your blueprint and hoped for your destruction. They were taking notes with one hand and hoping for your failure with the other. They don't want to acknowledge that element. Behind closed doors, they were attempting to be you, yet they spoke about you as if you were nothing. Your concepts were plagiarized, your mannerisms were mimicked, and your core was examined, repackaged, and shoddily reproduced. They want your spirit's fruit without having to pay the cost of cultivating it. They made fun of your strangeness, uniqueness, and worldview before trying to imitate the exact thing they were making fun of. The fact that it came so easily to you infuriated them. You simply were. You didn't strive to be profound, cold, or strong. Under the guise of phony support, it is what caused them to get angry. Because they couldn't replicate your frequency, no matter how hard they tried to wear your skin. You can't buy it online, produce it in a lab, or Google it. It is soul level. It has been assigned. And everyone who has based their identity on fads and borrowed characters is exposed by that type of genuineness. They attempted to silence you for that reason. They attempted to degrade you, isolate you, and make you doubt your sanity because you were on in a way they couldn't understand, not because you were off. And they attempted to outdo you with mimicry when they were unable to match you with originality. The issue is that reproductions eventually become weary. Since what's true flows from divine timing rather than frenzied effort, they are now worn out and always pursuing a version of you that they will never catch. You were more than simply their goal. You were the model, the benchmark, and the unseen force that shaped their whole brand. And since you were only living and never acting, they are suddenly unable to keep up. You have already advanced to the next level, while others are still attempting to figure out your formula. And they're going crazy because of it. Number 5. Your energy exposed their deception, so even when you were silent, they dreaded your presence. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you were strong without having to act. They couldn't stand to be around you. When you entered a room, the atmosphere changed. You weren't noisy. You weren't looking for approval. But others were uneasy only because of you. The loudest blow was your silence. Why? Because it revealed all of the phony things around you. You didn't need to confront them. You didn't have to show your receipts or clap back. The exposure was your very presence. In a world full of actors, you were genuine. And that type of energy is dangerous to those who have based their entire identity on receiving praise. They attempted to cast doubt on your worth, since they couldn't match your depth. You were odd, they muttered, too quiet, difficult to read. They were convicted, nevertheless, and they knew it in their hearts. Because the presence of someone who has been lying to themselves for a long time becomes intolerable. Without intending to, you caused their masks to itch. Their pandemonium was exposed by your composure. Their tactics appeared clumsy because of your honesty. They couldn't escape you, but you were the spiritual mirror they didn't ask for. They disliked you for no apparent reason because of this. They attempted to isolate you, picked on you, and spread rumors about you because of this. It was all shadow to cover up terror. Because individuals in their environment demonstrate their authority via influence, loudness, and control, they were even more irritated when they were unable to figure you out. However, you were a calm storm, unfazed and unaffected. Furthermore, one cannot purchase that type of groundedness or force. You have to earn it alone. They were aware that you were walking in alignment rather than merely with confidence. Furthermore, nothing makes a fake more unsettling than the actual thing. You exposed their insecurity, not created it. And they'll always remember how you accomplished it silently. 6th, they were only interested in making sure you lost first, not in winning. They had no intention of building anything. They lacked a clear vision, a goal, and a successful plan. Their entire goal was to prevent you from succeeding, not to promote development or healing. That was the entire game. They only wanted you to lose. They had no interest in winning. They believed they were winning by default, if they could keep you distracted by treachery, stumbling over your anguish, or preoccupied with survival, because they believed that the greatest danger they faced was your growth. They saw in you what they didn't see in themselves: purpose without a stage, strength with control, and potential with direction. And since they secretly knew what was going to happen to you, they became resentful rather than inspired. They noticed the favor. They sensed the change. You were in a heavenly delay, a slow-cooked process meant to ensure that your ascent was firm, unwavering, and certain. You weren't in a race. However, they saw every instant you remained still as a chance to meddle. In order to keep your hands too busy to hold your crown, they hurled drama at you in the form of falsehoods, smear campaigns, and emotional manipulation. They never realized, however, that you were being polished and not in a hurry. They were never a contender, hence there was never a competition. They were creating distractions, not leaving a legacy. And since your focus was all they ever had, their power disintegrated the moment you stopped giving them your attention. You were being positioned, not losing. Heaven was collecting your scars like royal stamps, while they were counting your delays like losses. You were just too selected to be hurried. You weren't behind. Their scheme only worked while you didn't know who you were. But now that you're back on your calling, they're scurrying. They were critics, not monarchs. Furthermore, critics never succeed. They only talk loudly while someone else assumes the position. 7th, their amusement was your lowest point. Their damnation is your ascent. They watched you like it was primetime TV while you were in bits. Their playlist was your suffering. They were rewinding your breakdowns like a favorite scene, not hoping for your recovery. They felt fun rather than empathy. For once, your damage made them feel taller, so they were amused. They thought they were up because you were down. They watched it with satisfaction, believing that your tale ended there, mistaking your rock bottom for your last scene. Your return is rocking the same floors they stood on laughing, but your rising is loud now, not because you're trying to be showy, but because healing echoes. Your elevation turned into a megaphone, yet they were banking on your quiet. The catch is that what your glow-up exposes about them is what's upsetting them, not simply your glow-up itself. Since they had a front-row ticket to your misery and choose to applaud for it rather than provide a helping hand, they must now confront the reality. Your success is now more than simply your ascent. It's a mirror that shows their dishonesty, envy, and phony empathy. They are now uncomfortable, not because of anything you did to them, but because your light is illuminating the things they attempted to conceal, such as their cruelty, their insignificance, and their need to put people below them in order to feel good. You simply healed without even seeking retribution. Because your happiness makes it more difficult for them to suppress their resentment that in and of itself is punishing them. Their pandemonium seems louder because of your calm. Their own stagnation is highlighted by your blessings. The same people that laughed at your sorrow, now they're trying to win people over. However, it is difficult to feel sorry for those who attempted to kill you and now find it intolerable that you have turned into a garden. 8th, they realized they couldn't handle your boundaries, therefore they wanted you broken. They desired access to the unhealed you, the one who doubted everything, over-explained, and let things go in order to maintain harmony, rather than a connection with the actual you. They found that version handy. It was simple to steal from someone who felt bad about saying no, and it was simple to deceive to someone who didn't trust their own instincts. They needed you shattered, not just preferred it, because the game was over the instant you were firm, clear, and spiritually anchored. They were looking for leverage, not affection, and your suffering provided them with it. They might manipulate the story and make you feel overly dependent, overly sensitive, or overly much as long as you were doubting yourself. They pulled on your emotions just enough to keep you pursuing their acceptance, and they used bewilderment as a leash. However, the flaw in their approach was healing. Healing. Because you began establishing limits when you regained your sense of value. Furthermore, setting limits is a narcissist's greatest nightmare. They don't know how to approach you now that you've recovered. The guilt trips are unsuccessful. The passive-aggressive jabs are immediately repelled. They're going crazy because the outdated strategies are no longer effective. You distance yourself from their chaos and no longer even entertain it. They were never ready for it either. They were wagering that you would remain in that emotional rut forever. They didn't anticipate that you would develop standards, teeth, and spine. The door they once walked through as if they owned it, it's gone. Not simply locked. They've been removed from your tranquility, denied access to your energy, and denied the privilege they formerly misused, as if it were their natural right. And what's the actual hurt for them? You outgrown the whole home, and they can't locate the new location, so you didn't bang the door in a fit of wrath. 9. They didn't want you to develop because your progress would show how stagnant they were. They were silently freaking out at your success, not applauding it. Your development was always about what your evolution would show about them, not simply about you going forward. Because the higher you went, the more evident it was that they had been standing still for years, claiming success while donning cologne-like phony confidence. Not because they detested you, but because your growth would draw attention to all the things about them that remained little, lazy, resentful, or false. They didn't ask for the attention your progress brought. They began to distract you with trivial disputes, fabricated drama, emotional manipulation masquerading as care, or anything else that would divert your attention from your recovery, your work, or your progress. This is what stagnation always does when it feels threatened. They understood deep down that they couldn't compete with you. And instead of rising with you, they attempted to keep you stuck in the same cycle from which you were struggling to get out. They wanted you to be psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually spent. They maintained control by taking advantage of your disarray. But you started, intentionally, softly. The version of you who dreaded outgrowing others, the one that made yourself tiny so others wouldn't feel insecure, and the version that put up with crumbs were the identities you began to discard day by day. Something stronger replaced that form when it died. You've changed into a more lucid, shrewd, and unrepentant version of yourself than your former self could have ever imagined. They are unable to cope with it. Even if you're not in competition, you're still more visible than they are. You're not boasting, but there's no denying your intensity. Just being you now makes their comfort zone seem like a coffin, even if you're not trying to belittle them. You are evidence that it was always an option to remain stranded. Furthermore, the truth is more profound than any slight. 10th, they anticipated you to self-destruct from desertion, not to remain alive. They believed your breaking point would be desertion. They believed that abandoning you to face the war alone would be the final straw, that you would disintegrate under the weight of loneliness and misery. However, they failed to account for your tenacity. They overlooked the fact that the absence they produced was a place for change rather than a void. You encountered God in a way you had never experienced before in the calm haven they imposed on you. They didn't know they were genuinely guiding you toward something bigger when they left. That loneliness was an invitation rather than a punishment. You were being reborn when they believed you were drowning in sorrow. You could plainly hear the whispers of divinity without the distractions of their presence, their loudness, and their manipulation. You discovered how to grow alone and understand that you were never really alone, how to sit with oneself, and how to find serenity in isolation. You started to realize your spiritual mission and your own strength, and you were given a strength you never would have thought possible in that hallowed place. The thought of someone attempting to manipulate you with phony love, hollow promises, or shallow devotion seems absurd now that you have experienced divinity. You have experienced the depths of your soul, had a face-to-face encounter with God, and are no longer influenced by the world's delusions. The tranquility you discovered within yourself is greater than anything they can provide. Your borders are unassailable, and neither is your value. They believed that desertion would break you. Rather, they just created room for you to discover who you really are. No one can control the strength and clarity with which you now move. 11th, they were unaware that they were testing a prophecy. They believed they were harming someone. They believed they were interacting with an ordinary individual, someone they could control, break, and ignore with no repercussions. They didn't take you seriously. They overlooked the fact that you were a living prophecy, not just a human. They came at you with everything they had because they thought that by manipulating you, lying and betraying you, they might break your spirit. However, they were unaware that they were only putting a heavenly plan to the test. You were doing more than simply enduring their brutality. You were carrying out a prophecy that had been penned long before they ever came into your life. Divine coding was used to sow you as a seed that would endure hardship. They saw a chance to bring you down, but they failed to see that every bit of pressure they put on you simply strengthened you, strengthened your roots, and strengthened your connection to your mission. They were only sowing the seeds of your future, even if they believed they were removing you from the game. You were never intended to crumble under stress. Rather, you were intended to become a force that demonstrated the immense strength that could be found in something modest, silent, and unassuming. Their treachery was historic, not just personal. You were living out a tale that extended beyond your lifetime, not just conquering a few challenges. Your victory was for everyone who has ever felt undervalued, ignored, and abandoned, not just for you. You turned into a prophecy come to life. And the only thing that helped that prophecy come to pass more gloriously than they could have ever dreamed was their effort to shatter you. They are now in the background as you rise, the ones who are left to recount the story of the person who tried to save you, but failed. They serve as a warning to everyone who ever believes they have the ability to hurt someone who is meant to be great. You didn't find their betrayal tragic. Rather, it taught them a valuable lesson about how to fail. Number 12, your delay was heavenly discipline. Your demise was their delusion. They saw your quietness and assumed it was the start of the end for you. They believed that if you retreated, withdrawn, or had a period of loneliness, it was a sign of failure. However, they overlooked the fact that your stillness was a sign of readiness rather than weakness. Your delay was divine discipline in action, not an indication that you were lagging behind. You were being fashioned in the dark, not lounging around, doing nothing. Every silent stride you took, every moment of silence, and every halt in your path all contributed to a larger plan that was unrelated to their perspectives. You were being formed while they were busy observing and waiting for you to fall apart. Your heart was being fortified, your mind honed, and your soul purified. In reality, the hallowed place where you gained the most significant life lessons was the solitude they attempted to characterize as failure. You were able to access heavenly knowledge, uncover your actual potential, and realign yourself with your life's greater purpose during those covert times of seclusion. You were being planted, even though they believed you were being buried. Your emergence now involves something far more than simply re-entering the world. It is a spiritual assertion rather than a return to the past. You've emerged from the shadows as the version of yourself that was always supposed to emerge, not simply as the person people believed they knew. All of their uncertainty, skepticism, and attempts to silence you just prepared the way for this moment. It is no accident that you have returned. It is a supernatural affirmation that you are invincible, that you were never intended to be their victim, and that the quiet they thought you were giving up was actually the quiet before your spiritual storm. Number 13. Although they believed they had enough time to ruin you, grace hastened your recovery. They believed they had endless time to shatter you and watch you fall apart, believing that their hold on you would get stronger every day. They thought that their words, their treachery, and their plots would gradually bring you to a position from which you would never fully recover. One element, however, was overlooked: grace, the type of kindness that not only restores, but also speeds things up. They were unaware that your quick ascent was really sparked by the same moment they believed to be to their benefit. You didn't simply get better or become the person you used to be. They couldn't even comprehend the version of you that you were thrown into. God was assembling a response so strong that it tore apart the entire fabric of their expectations as they waited for you to collapse. It was time for divine preparation, not devastation, as they perceived it. And now, while they sit in their astonishment, you're experiencing benefits they believed were unattainable, and marvels they can't describe. You are experiencing things that they dismissed as unattainable, and they are unable to comprehend them. Their goal was to make sure you never stood again, not only to make you stumble. However, they failed to realize that they could never control your tail. Their misgivings, their animosity, and their attempts to keep you quiet were all outpaced by grace. Having to witness the same person they wished would fail, climb above them, and not only ascend, but thrive, has left them mired in remorse. Grace restored what they attempted to destroy. And the same thing that keeps them up at night, questioning everything they believe to be true about you, is the pace at which you are being restored. Number 14. Your whole being is a reprimand now that you have been restored. Just being is a significant statement now that you're healed. You are more than simply a survivor. You are now a living example of the holy power of healing. To those who believed they could break you, every action you do, every word you say, and every look you give is a silent but unmistakable rebuke. You are more than simply a survivor. You are a living example of how the human spirit can endure when it is in harmony with divine purpose. They believed that by pushing you to the limit, they would exhaust you and leave you with nothing more to offer. However, you did more than simply survive. You changed. You've turned into the storm and are no longer pleading for calm. Their perception of what true power looks like is suddenly called into question by the strength you radiate. They believed that by stealing your tranquility, they might weaken you. They were unaware, however, that your tranquility was always only a result of your metamorphosis. You are now the one who shakes the earth beneath their feet, instead of pleading for calm. The ones on their knees now are they. But it's out of regret, not prayer. They didn't think you would get up, much less do it so forcefully. They had no idea that you would return stronger, more grounded, and more complete than before. What about the irony? Their goal was to shatter you. Rather, you've turned into the same thing that makes people face their own shortcomings. They are constantly reminded of their own transgressions, treachery, and conceit whenever they gaze upon you. They can't ignore you anymore. They are now forced to relive every instance in which they attempted to undermine you. And every moment you maintain your composure is evidence of their folly. You are a living manifestation of divine vengeance in addition to being healed. Furthermore, they are unable to avoid the reality of what they attempted to destroy. Ultimately, your narrative is a live example of the strength of divine grace and the tenacity of the human spirit, not merely one of survival. They believed they knew you. They believed they could crush your spirit, ruin your mission, and control your destiny. However, they were unaware of the fact that you were never intended to be a casualty. You were always supposed to be a force that would soar higher and higher than they could ever dream of, a prophetic remark. The loudest response to the questions they never asked is your actual being as you stand in the completeness of your recovery. You can celebrate your win without shouting. You don't have to brag about your progress. The evidence is your presence, your walk, your unflinching calm, and your indisputable strength. Your supernatural ascent now rests on the storm they previously dreaded. They believed they had control over your tale, but ultimately, people will remember yours. They feel a sense of remorse. How about you? You are standing in the reality of your unwavering mission. You've gone from wounded to whole, from sufferer to conqueror. You've evolved into something greater than they could possibly imagine. Regaining your power and demonstrating to the world that nothing can stop what is meant to rise were the goals of your quest, which went beyond simply mending. Simply keep in mind that you're living in God's plan, not simply your reality, while people observe your every action and continue to attempt to understand your strength. Furthermore, the future that has already been written for you cannot be changed by their hatred or treachery. Your presence serves as a divine reminder that nothing and no one can ever stop what is intended to be, not just your triumph. To ensure you never miss out on the motivation and truth you deserve, please press the notification bell and subscribe to the channel if you found this message to be meaningful and if it inspired you to change your life. If you understand the power of rising from the ashes, you'll like this video. Additionally, leave a remark below. Talk about your experience, your path, and the challenges you've surmounted. We're all on this journey together, and your opinion counts. Remember to forward this message to everyone who needs to hear it today, because we start a revolution when we stand together. Continue to develop and shine, and never forget that your tale is far from done. It's only the beginning.